Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad al-Fatih lima ughliqa wal khatim lima sabaqa nasir al-haqq bil haqq wal hadi ila siratik mustaqim wa ala alihi qadri miqdari al-azim. نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله مرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we ask him subhanahu wa ta'ala that we have inshallah that our presence is accepted and there's khair in it, inshallah, with the intentions that we bring. So the intention to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and approach the month of Allah, the sacred month of Ramadan. So these intentions that we have to approach with higher meanings, inshallah. These are powerful things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how doors open, inshallah, for us spiritually. Like, when we bring intentions and we want to approach things in different ways to how we may have previously. Like Ramadan comes, mashallah, every year, and we have the Mawlid, for example, season, the blessed birth of the Rasul. Just to the fact that people intend, people have gathered here, inshallah, and apart from those who were bullied and forced to be here, maybe everyone's come with an intention, maybe to do things differently, right? To approach Ramadan differently, and approaching Ramadan is ultimately about approaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You want to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a particular spirit, in a particular sense of being, and a sense of presence, and this is all khair, inshallah. And so we ask Allah that our intentions bear fruit, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that things can be different. One of the things that Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, one of the imams of our tradition, he has a book that he's written called Zad al-Ma'ad. One of the things that he mentions is, he says that, there's a verse in the Quran where Allah says, وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's an interesting verse because the meaning is not immediately clear, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِسْتَجِيبُوا لِلَّهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ إِذَا دَعَاكُمْ لِمَا يُحْيِيكُمْ. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, when they call you to that which gives you life, when Allah and the Messenger call you to that which gives you life, istajibu. The command is that you should respond to Allah and the Messenger. Right? And so, what does it mean, call you to that which gives you life? The Imams, there's different levels of meaning, but the primary meaning of that is that everything that Allah calls us to, whether it's fasting Ramadan, whether it's praying our 5 prayers, whether it's dhikr, whether it's higher character, good character, what are these things that we're taught by the Rasul and that we're called to, right? They are lima yuhyikum. They give us life, right? And that's ultimately what this is about. The entire teaching is about attaining a type of spiritual life and a type of spiritual rejuvenation, right? And immediately after, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعْلَمُوا, and have knowledge, be aware, أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَحُولُ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَقَلْبِهِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's interesting, the translation's kind of frightening and misleading. If you listen to what it says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yahulu bayn al-mar'i wa qalbihi. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stands between, Allah comes between a person and their own heart, right? It's interesting, what does that mean? And the Imams of Tafsir, there's a lot of interpretations. You can think about that on many levels. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes between or stands between. Allah blocks a person from between themselves and their heart. And one of the things that just after prayer came to mind was, this idea of making the most of opportunities. Because how many Ramadan have come and gone, and we know our states, right? And we ask Allah for cover, we ask Allah for safety. But Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, as I mentioned, when he explains this verse that Allah comes between a person and their heart, he explains the verse. He says that this is for a person, man futiha lahu baban, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala futiha lahu babun. Allah opens a door for someone. Allah opens a door of opportunity, right? A door to reach Him, a door to go back to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah opens these doors, and we know this. Think about your life, for example, young or old. You just think about all these doors that Allah opens. Maybe it was an umrah that you went on. Maybe it's someone's company that you have, right? Maybe it's experiences in life. Could be anything. But these are all doors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens for us, and they're all invitations. In every, one of the Imams, he says, in every qadr, in every moment of destiny that Allah unfolds, Allah gives to you in your life, if you look deeply, it's an invitation from Allah to come back to Him. Whatever it is, good news, bad news, He's inviting you subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? If it's difficulty or ease, it's an invitation. Pain or pleasure, the eyes of the Arifin, Ibn al-Jawzi radiallahu anhu, the great Imam, students of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. In fact, he sat in the gatherings of Sayyidina Ghaus al-Azam radiallahu anhu. Ibn al-Jawzi, he says that the reason why the eyes and the hearts of the Gnostics, of awliyaullah, one of the key differences between the eyes of a layperson and the eyes of someone that Allah has chosen for wilayah is that they can look at every event in life and they can see the invitation of God. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling me back to Him. There's something here I need to learn. There's a lesson that needs to be learned. There's something that needs to be, an opportunity that needs to be made the most of, right? And so Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says that the meaning of Allah coming between a person and their heart is that Allah will open doors up for you. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَنْتَهِزْهُ وَيُجِبْهُ subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever doesn't make the most of whoever doesn't enter the door when it opens, Allah will then block that door, never to be opened again. That avenue is never opened again, even if you intend it. So he says that Allah يحول بين المرء وقلبه, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يحول بين قلب الرجل وإرادته. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes between the heart of a person and their own will. So like Ramadan is an opportunity, and the Rasul speaks about this opportunity. Like when Ramadan would come, the Prophet ﷺ would give a khutbah, really powerful. It's in Sahih al-Bukhari and other places. The Prophet ﷺ would rise and he'd give a khutbah, and he would say, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ شَهْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. The Prophet ﷺ, imagine the Rasul, alayhi salawatullah, he's talking about a month from the months of Allah, and he's talking about a period of time, and he says this is an immense, it's azim. These moments that you have, immense moments with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so what Ibn Qayyim is saying is that when these kinds of moments come and Allah opens these doors for us to go back to Him, to rectify our states, to seek Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we don't make the most of them, those doors will shut ultimately, right? And then even when you want it, like you might and this happens a lot, like Ramadan passes and we look back and often these moments have passed us by, and then even when we want them, even when you make the intention, you have the irada, at that point now that door is shut. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what it means for Allah to block, come between a person's heart and a person themselves. Meaning that when those doors open, if the opportunity is not taken and we don't make the entry, like we don't enter those doors and seek what needs to be sought, then these doors will shut and we lose opportunities. Like what Hassan just announced, for example, about these kinds of moments that we have, retreats and opportunities to be in the company of righteous people, opportunities to change our ways, to receive something of the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. Like, you hear about retreats and classes or these kinds of gatherings. You could think about it as a gathering. That could be a framing. So somebody might think about it as like, we're going to a gathering in the masjid, or we're attending a retreat, or we're going to a camp, there's going to be lectures. That's one way. That's just the outward. That's the itinerary. Like those are the activities that you're going to engage. Ultimately, every time you turn up inside the masjid, or you sit inside a gathering like this, or you sign up for a retreat or a class, or whatever the case might be, you're signing up to your portion of the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. That's what you've signed up to, right? When you sign up to turn up to a gathering, or you sign up for a program or a course or a retreat, you're just signing up. Like for what we're like, when we look at it horizontally, it's like I've just signed up, I just made a payment, right? In the unseen, though, what's happened is that the invitation came and Allah allotted a portion for you of the legacy of the Rasul ﷺ, and now that's going to be dished out. You're going to receive that, right? And so you just signed up to the reception of that legacy. And so it's really important that we frame these things in a powerful way. And that's the point of, inshallah, our gathering here. Many of you might have seen the poster, this idea of Ramadan, realizing the realities of Ramadan, awakening the higher self. The point behind it, and inshallah we ask Allah for tawfiq, and we ask Allah that this is something reflective, something that we can really take, and that's why I just something for you guys, inshallah. So there's going to be some discussion that we have inside the session, and also take notes, make mental notes, and there's an activity for us to do some planning, inshallah, if we get around to it, which knowing me I probably won't, but let's see. We'll probably get to an activity that we want to do, just for some kind of just to root this in practicality, right, and plan this in a deeper way, inshallah. But the Imams, they give us a principle, right? The Imams, they teach us that one's reception, what we take from from these special days and nights and moments. Like we're in the month of Sha'ban, right? What we take from these things, generally, it's in accordance with your readiness, right? So how ready are we, for example? Like, you know, the Imams, they have this statement in the science of spirituality, the Imams of the inward, our teachers, they say, al-madadu ala qadr al-mashhad. Right? They have this statement where they say that the madad, the spiritual goodness and the spiritual energy and vibes that you take from whatever it is, like a gathering like this, the month of Ramadan, from a night in Qiyam al-Layl, what you take from these things spiritually is in accordance with how ready you are. Like, so Ramadan comes, and we've had this, right? We've all been there where it's like crept up on us. Like we have those moments where Ramadan, suddenly it's announced and we're not ready, and you know, and it's a kind of a pay. It's like a bargain. Like what do we go for? Do we go and get the shopping, or do we pray the nafil? Like people should be ready for the moment that Ramadan, like that Maghrib kicks in, and you want to find. You know, one of my teachers used to say that if you find yourself at the beginning of Ramadan and at the end of Ramadan, like so when Maghrib kicks in on the day when Ramadan is announced that night, and on the last day when Eid is announced, if you can find yourself on the prayer mat in dua, you can sandwich the entire month between two nafil here and two nafil at the end, dua at the beginning, dua at the end. That's a sign that Allah intends immense good for a person, right? Like in these kinds of moments, people are not sat before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except that He has plans of immense spiritual goodness. And so they say the first 15 minutes of Ramadan, first 15 minutes, 1-5, first 15 minutes when that Maghrib kicks in, and the last 15 minutes, they can almost make or break the entire 30 days, 29 days, right? And so, but there needs to be a readiness, inshallah. And so what I'm going to look to do is we're going to be doing some reading together from a classical text, one of our Imams, about how we frame this, right? And then there'll be some discussion. There'll be time for Q&A, inshallah. The Q&A is not designed for fiqh stuff. So it's not about, does this break my fast? Does that not break my fast? Can I vape in Ramadan? Can I not vape in Ramadan? Of course, nobody here does that, right? Did we just pray Isha? What adhan is that? Yeah, okay. So we want to frame this properly, inshallah, right? And the Q&A is designed for, I mean, there's a lot of fiqh content. If people need that, we can refer people to that, inshallah. But the idea is to work on your framing, your mindset, right? So often we miss out on a lot of these things because of mindset issues. Like, for example, if you don't approach Ramadan with the right mindset, like what is this month? What does fasting mean? What value does it have? What was intended? See, each act of worship is designed for something. The prayer has a design, right? And like when you think about it in a worldly sense, like when you lay out your day, for example, when you plan your day, there's a particular outcome that you intend, right? So, for example, when you have your day plan that you're going to wake up at this time, why? There's a particular outcome because you want to make it somewhere else on time. I need to get to work on time, college, school on time, right? So you design your wake up timing and routine to make it to the next destination on time. You plan your day around school, college, uni, or work or whatever. It has a particular design. The idea is that everything has a particular design, and that design needs to suit the outcome. Like if, for example, if you think about acts of worship, the prayer has a design, right? So for example, the prayer is cyclical in its design. It's a cycle. You start at Fajr, and it ends at Isha, and then it's back again at Fajr. The fact that it's circular, the fact that prayers and timing is circular, the way that a Muslim thinks about the day, we don't think about it as a 24-hour linear thing. We think about it as a cyclical thing, right? That has a particular purpose. It suits a particular purpose, right? It serves a particular purpose. And so the way the prayer is, the standing and the bowing and the prostrating, that's the design, the architecture of prayer has a particular reason. There's an intended outcome. Why do we start standing? Why do we move to the bowing position? Why don't we start in sajda? That would be like a bigger act of submission, right? Why don't we start in sajda and then reverse up to the standing position, for example? The idea is all of these things, if you reflect on them, there's intended outcomes. So, and Ramadan, one of the problems that we have is that the intended outcome in a lot of our minds, it's either abstract, it's like high level, or it's completely blurred altogether. So we have an idea, but it's abstract, it's too high level, or it's blurred. Like, and this is what I want us to think about. One of the things that the modern world that we live in, One of the things that modernity has done, like modern living, just life in the way that it's the way that we live it, whether it's the West or the East, Muslim country or not, generally there's the same pattern, right, throughout the world. One of the things that's happened in the modern world is that things have been like stripped of meaning. Nothing has meaning anymore. Right? So even in their culture, in the Western culture itself, the rites and the rituals and the symbols and the acts, performances that they had, they used to have a meaning, a deeper meaning, right? So if you, I mean, as a good way to think about this is Christmas, for example, right? So because it's all fresh and we're just coming out of the Christmas season and everyone remembers how their Christmas was, right? So if you think about Christmas itself, it had meaning. Like now, if you think about it, like modern forms or modern expressions of Christmas, it's completely, what is it? It's like, it's materialistic, right? Buying gifts, giving gifts. It's about eating. It's about drinking. It's about partying. It's about, getting drunk, getting high, and making it to the Boxing Day sales, right? Although you're just recovering from your, the party the night before. It's all become reduced to this kind of very material, meaningless thing. What value does it have? Like it used to, there's a time when it was religious and spiritual, then it stopped being religious, but it became cultural. So it became about family, and it became about meeting family and about fulfilling dues towards family. And then that became that, even that's been taken away now, right? So one of the things about the modern world is that it takes out the sacredness, the meaning of things. And this is one might think, well, what's the relevance of that? I'm a Muslim. What's Christmas got to do with anything, right? The idea is that because we live here, these types of thinking, they start to spill over. So if you think about like the way that we approach ritual as Muslims, a lot of these things become a lot of these things are now becoming desacralized. The sacredness and the spiritual meaning and the spiritual value of these things is being removed, and that's what we need to kind of reset and reconnect to in our minds. Very important. So there's an article for those of you who were there in our Marifa meetup that we had a couple of weeks ago. I shared this article. There's a really good article. If people get a chance, maybe read this, inshallah. There's a sister called Maryam Masmoudi. I want you to read a passage from there. And so if you listen carefully, because then there's an exam straight after, right? So you'll have to turn on everything you have, right? So she says, this is talking about Ramadan now. She has an article called Ramadan, the Month of Anti-Imperialism, right? And she's approaching it in a very interesting way. But here's what she says. She says, contemporary discourse on the benefits of fasting increasingly neglect the moral and metaphysical essence, offering material explanations instead. Either fasting is to feel as the poor feel. You heard that one, right? So one of the wisdoms of why and by the way, this is not something that's wrong, because the Imams have mentioned this, even in the books of old, right? But like fasting is about feeling how the poor people are feeling. How many times has that been sold to you, by the way, when you're growing up? Like, why do you fast? Have people heard that one? Why do we fast? So we can feel how poor people are feeling. My travel buddy, we were just talking about this on the way up, right? So why do you not drink water? So we can feel how poor people feel. But what if poor people are drinking water? So then can I drink water so I can feel what poor people are feeling when they drink water? Do you get the point? There's like the logic kind of gets stuck in itself, right? So look what she says. She says, either fasting is to feel as the poor feel, appealing to the West's fragmented moral understanding, where the only mode of existence, forget that part, that's philosophical, we'll come back to it, right? But she says, either fasting is to feel as the poor feel, or fasting is for associated health benefits, right? This is the new line. Have you heard it for the last 5 or 10 years? The new line that Muslims have taken, because they want to, they want to be able to connect with people at work and people at uni and everybody else that's completely drowning in this secular, liberal, irreligious mindset. So now fasting has become about intermittent fasting and what's your routine? Are you doing is it a 18 off and a 6 on, or a 6 on and an 18 off, and what's your eating window and all? So now it's become about health benefits, for increased focus, right? Better metabolism, pumping up ketones in your blood so you can go off your fat system rather than your carb system, sugar system, stop burning sugar. It's all become about this now. So people are now talking about fasting. What she's saying is people now sell the idea of fasting or convince themselves about fasting through the associated health benefits as validated by science, right? Because obviously that's going to buy us get some brownie points with our colonial overlords, if we can say. While both explanations offer worthwhile, morally decent incentives for fasting, they're inherently physical and reduce Ramadan to the material. That last part's very important. You know what she's saying? That when you say we fast because we want to feel what the poor feel, or we fast because the Prophet ﷺ said, Sumu tasahhu, like in the famous hadith, fast and you will be healthy, right? You'll have good health. And the Rasul said that. So we're not denying that fasting brings health benefits. What she's saying is that when you make fasting about, shed some extra pounds, right, that have been building up, or it becomes about feeling at one with poor people, it becomes about, economic solidarity, right, or emotional solidarity, or it becomes about ketones and metabolism, it becomes about these things. She's saying the problem with that approach is that it reduces something like fasting to something material and physical. Do you see the point? So when fasting becomes about like, I want to feel how the poor feel, that's just about you having a moment where you're going to share that. Because the thing is, feeling how the poor feel, you can feel that for 5 minutes a day when you're not fasting, right? What's the problem with this approach? Somebody might say, well, what's the issue with that? What's wrong with the reduce? And by the way, this same thing applies to, let's give another example, right? The same thing applies to salah. So I don't know if you've heard this particular approach to dawah, where they will reduce salah. Like a non-Muslim asks you, why do you pray? What's the benefit of prayer, right? How do you explain that to a non-Muslim, someone you want to connect with on the liberal secular level? How do you explain that, for example? Or what have you heard that said? Maybe we don't say that, but how would people generally explain that? Like what's trending right now? What's the trend right now with prayer and things like that? If you're those of you in the hippy dippy scene, like prayers about what? For example, right? Stress release. So when you go into sajda, you get more blood coming into the head. It's got scientific backing, bro. It's not like right? So you go into sajda, and there's going to be more blood flow to the head, and it's going to release like that shot of blood. You have dopamine, and therefore you're going to relieve stress and anxiety, things like that, right? Good example. Meditation. You want to explain salah to somebody, like, oh, this is just a Muslim meditation, right? And again, nothing inherently wrong with that. So in and of itself, no problem, right? So we're not putting it down. If you can use that, right? What we're saying is that it's material, right? It's about meditation. Like the one that was trending, maybe this is too back in the day for some of you guys, right? Back in the days, like early 2000s, what we used to hear was that salah has health benefits. Exercise is good mobility routine, right? You're literally moving your entire, every muscle in your body is going to get moved, right? Someone once told me that, we have that in the Hanafi madhab, when you sit in, how do the men sit in the at-tahiyat position, where you prop up one foot and you cross the other under? I read an article once that the benefit of that was that you'll never have back pain, or you'll never have a back injury. It kind of puts your spine, your tailbone, everything comes in order if you sit like that. Might be true, might not, wallahu alam. But the point is, again, the same mindset. You've taken prayer, something as grand and as immense as prayer, and it's become reduced now to some physical benefits, right? Zakat, for example, what's the explanation we give for zakat to secular people? That's an easy one. How do you explain that? Zakat. Yeah, but what about it? What is it? How do we explain? You can just answer, guys. Bismillah. Yeah. So if this is actually a fact, by the way, so if everybody was to pay their zakat and it was to be distributed responsibly at the right hands, you could solve the poverty crisis in most of the world, for example, right? Equal distribution of wealth. It's about reducing the gap between the rich and the poor, right? We don't want a societal gap, economic gap to be too big, so we bring them down. It's about balance and equilibrium in society, because if the poor know that the rich are giving them, they don't rebel against them. So they won't go out and have protests and go against the rich, right? And the rich, they give that to the poor to keep them in their place, right? So it maintains a balanced society. So you'll find literature, communist Islamic literature, that explains zakat literally like this. People have heard of the Hizb ut-Tahrir, right? Many, they're not active anymore. Many years ago, we had the HT in our days, right? So we had the HT was like an active movement here in the West. And if you read their literature, this is how they explain zakat and fasting. And so what's the benefit of praying in Jama'ah? The rich rub shoulders with the poor, and it reduces their envy towards them, and it reduces their hatred towards them, because they know they're ultimately equal where it matters, right? So what do you guys think? Everyone gets the point, right? The idea is you take acts of immense spiritual intensity and worship and you reduce it to a physical benefit. Those physical benefits do exist, by the way. The economic benefits exist, the outward benefits exist, the social benefits all exist. People say that the benefit, I mean, I read this was recently, it's very interesting actually. Just about a year ago, there was a paper released, I don't remember by which university now, some European university, on the difference between male psychology and male therapy and female therapy. So a lot of psychotherapy right now, counseling and therapy, it's very feminine orientated. It's female orientated. It's not working for men. Counseling and therapy, these kinds of things, generally they flop for men. And they said one of the reasons is because of the format. So they said that women just by their fitrah, they're hardwired, right? Women are better in a conversational setting where they're sat face to face. They connect more because they're big on eye contact. Those of you who are married will know this, right? You have to make eye contact with the spouse, otherwise you're not there. She's going to be like, you're here, but you're not here, right? There has to be eye contact. So women are big on eye contact. And so it's just a thing, they're hardwired like that. They were saying that a lot of therapy fails with men because when you take, so here's the thing, right? Try this with your brothers or your sons, right? Women folk. Try this with your brothers. Sit down and like have your brother or anybody else sit in front of you, eye to eye, lean into him like your counselors, therapists do, right? Lean into them and be like, tell me how you're feeling today. Like, what have you been dreaming about recently? Like, my man just broke eye contact. I wasn't even looking at him, but he literally looked down, right? The idea is that men will immediately break eye contact. It's too direct, too intimate. That's not how they work. So what they did was they started a men's therapy. This is what the study was. They started a men's therapy group where they, rather than having them sit face to face and converse, they have them stand side by side, work on something with their hands, and then talk. Suddenly, the men drop their barriers. They open up. They get vulnerable suddenly. They can talk about their feelings now, but side to side. So no kidding. I read that, and I was actually talking to somebody about it, and I was talking to the research, and somebody said, no wonder Jama'at, we pray in Jama'ah standing side by side. So because it's men's therapy. So men stand and rub shoulders next to each other, and they're doing something with their hands because they're moving up and down. So again, that might be a factor. We're not saying it's not. Allah's wisdom, multi-layered, multifaceted, infinite. We have no idea what's going on. Like we have no idea, even on a physiological level, to this day, we probably don't know the reality of why the prayer is the way it is. Imams have written for centuries. There's a great Imam from Bukhara, Central Asian, Uzbeki scholar. He wrote a book on Hikmat al-Tashriya, on a book on the wisdom of why the law is the way it is. If you read that, he's writing in the 6th century. And he says things about the prayer, like why does the prayer begin the way it begins? Why do we stand facing a certain direction? Why is it that the sufuf have to be lined up? Why did the Prophet ﷺ say don't leave any gaps? What's the psychological impact of being shoulder to shoulder, for instance? There's got to be something. He's talking about these things 6th century. And so we're not saying that these things don't have any meaning or they don't have any value. They will be, for sure, right? But what's the danger of reducing ritual worship, spiritual devotion to just these physical, material, outward things? What do you guys think? So what's the problem with going down this whole fasting, health benefits, psychological benefits, metabolic benefits? What do you think is the problem with that? What's the issue? Because we're not saying we're not saying it's not true, and we're not saying it doesn't exist. What's the problem with framing it like that? Framing it in that way. So you're fasting, you approach Ramadan with that mindset. What's the issue with that? What do you think? Go on, Umar.
You disregard every spiritual blessing or positive outcome.
Okay, so there's the issue of disregard. What if someone says, no, I'm not disregarding it as such, this is just my take on it, this is how I approach it? What's the possible danger of that? So you're right that there's an element of that, but even something even more dangerous. What do you guys think in terms of the approach, the mindset? Okay, there could be you're right, Isaac, that's good, right? So there could be an issue at a niyyah level, right? Where, for example, like, is that why you're doing it? Are you doing it just to feel better? Are you doing, and that's actually getting to the heart of the problem here, right? Are you doing it to feel better? Are you doing it for the health benefits? Like, what kind of intention is that? That's not a sound intention for worship. That can be a side effect, But as an intention, as a mindset, it's a problem. Good. What else? Even on a more basic level. Go on, Fatima. Okay, good. 100%. So let's take that for granted. Let's say that you are missing the point. You've missed the point. So when you approach it like that, you miss the point. Uh, on a more kind of on a even on a more superficial, straightforward level. What, for example, someone says, "I pray so that I can get my mobility routine." It's the replacement for Pilates or yoga. So I don't have to go to yoga that day because I did 20 rak'ahs at Tahajjud. So I'm good. I feel all stretched out, mashallah. It's all supple. What's the issue with that? What's the problem with that? Exactly. What if, for example, so somebody might say, well, with the prayers movements, you're not getting to every last possible stretch, right? So why don't you do this that's better for your stretching routine? This is better for your back, for anxiety release, for like whatever, right? For relief from stress. So the minute the alternative comes along, suddenly now the heart begins to question, well, if in other words, there's alternatives that will fulfill those material functions and material goals in a better, more effective way than the act of worship. Do you see the issue, right? So if you, my point is, ultimately the point is this, and what the sister's saying in the article, if we start framing high spiritual acts of devotion and worship from the purely material, physical lens, which is the angle that the modern world takes on these things. And Muslims, unfortunately, because like I said, we're kind of ghuraba, right? We spent a lot, we're strangers to this land. So we want to appease the people. We want to, make sure that I'm on the level. We want to make sure that people understand why we do what we do. Because of that, we've been using this rhetoric for a long time now. And so now we have an entire generation of young people that this is what's selling it to them. And that becomes a problem, right? And the issue is this now. If you look at it from a Quran and Sunnah perspective, for example, how does the Quran frame fasting? The famous verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. What does the Quran say? What's the framework for fasting? The outcome. What is it designed to do? We all know this one, right? Taqwa, right? And taqwa is what? Someone, a brief, loose description. Anyone? What's taqwa? How do you describe it? So Allah says fasting is there, not for the weight loss, not for the health, not for the anxiety release, etc. All of that, you get that all. The beauty of it is you can get the physical and mental benefits without intending them. So why kind of waste your intention? Because you're going to get the benefit anyway, right? You're going to get the physical benefit whether you intend it or not, whether you frame it like that or don't, right? This taqwa would be, how would you describe taqwa or translate it? Anyone? For example, God consciousness, right? That is a very immaterial thing. It's not a physical thing. That's taking this, so you're taking a physical act like not eating, not drinking, feeling hunger. You're taking the physical act and you just, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He set the bar for where He wants the conversation. So let's not drop the conversation. Allah set the bar. He wants to come. So Allah is saying that you're fasting. I mean, think about this. So Allah connects your fasting to consciousness of Him, and we take fasting and connect it to weight loss. You see what the problem is? It's a massive malfunction in our spiritual kind of machinery. It's a big problem, right? So Allah connects, like if you think about the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, some of the ways people know the hadith, right? How the Rasul Alayhi Salawatullah, how does he talk about fasting? The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, like he talks about fasting, as-sawmu junnah. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Sawm, fasting is a junnah. A junnah is like a spiritual shield, right? A spiritual shield. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying is somebody who fasts, Allah creates around them a spiritual shield that protects them, right? That's the Rasul's level of discourse. And then when we talk about fasting, it's just down right back to whatever, I feel better. My metabolism's improved, right? I can eat more carbs after Ramadan because I metabolize them better. Like, see the level of conversation, right? So, and this is why framing is so important. Framing is significant, like how you approach these things and your framework for these and these are basics. We're talking about the 5 pillars here. We're talking about fasting. We're talking, like someone says, like, I was just on Umrah recently, mashallah, a lot of our blessed people here were on Umrah. We were on Umrah together. I was one of the nights we were doing tawaf. I think, Shaykh Hassan, did you see this? That guy doing the exercise on the roof. Okay, yeah. So we were doing tawaf one night, and because I'm so focused on my tawaf, this is what I observe whilst I'm doing tawaf, right? So we're doing tawaf, and there's a guy wearing a smartwatch, tracksuits. He's got his what do you call the iPhone? What are they called? AirPods, like full noise cancellation. Right. By the way, those things are dangerous. Like, don't be on the road with them. I've seen accidents and people fall off train things and all sorts. Right. So anyway, AirPods in, watch on, and he's running around doing tawaf around the Kaaba. Did anybody else see anything like that? No. From amongst the colorful sights that you get to see in tawaf nowadays, one of them was this one, right? Where you have, so the guy, it's two birds with one, right? You're getting your 12,000 steps in, which is how much the 7 rounds were. So you get your 12,000 steps in, and you're doing it around the Kaaba. So you're getting the tawaf, and you're getting the exercise and the steps. And mashallah, like, we're better, right? AC all around. So you're like practically in a air-conditioned gym almost, right? And I mean, that's holy gym time right there, right? So that's how you do exercise in style, mashallah. So holy style, of course. So, but the idea is that if you start framing these things in this way, they become a problem. Like, you're not going to the masjid for Jama'ah is I'm getting my steps in. You're going to get the steps in anyway. Make a higher niyyah, frame it in a higher way. And so, but the key thing is to look at where has the Rasul, where has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ, where have they set the bar for this conversation? And like I said, we're just talking basics here. This is not like extra stuff. We're talking your 5 prayers, your fast in Ramadan, your Hajj, Umrah, talking about the 5 pillars. If you frame them, and you know, like the Imams, the scholars of our time, I heard this from many people, like from some of the Imams of our time, they say the age, Allah knows the age we live in. And it's not an age of extras. People can't do nafal. People can't fast extra. The people who are getting nafal fasts and nafal prayers in, like mashallah alayhim, it's a blessing in this age to have anything like that. But what the teacher, mashayikh of our time, they're saying, like I heard this from Habib Umar. He said somebody that does their 5 pillars, you pray your prayers and you do your Ramadan fast to give your zakat, with the right mindset, which is what we're talking about. Do the same basic act that you're meant to do anyway, but get the mindset right, get the niyyah right, and the framing right. And he said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will unlock wilayah in the age that we live in for a person like that. 5 pillars with the right framing. Allah will begin to unlock wilayah for people like that. Because look at the age. Like, it's a very difficult, dark kind of situation. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. But this is the framing issue is critical, right? And this is what she goes on to speak about in the article. With Ramadan, and this goes to your point, Fatima, you were mentioning, if we miss the framing, ultimately we miss the point. And that's the danger. Like, you don't want to miss the point with what the act of worship is designed to do, right? So, second key concept that I want to share with you guys. Where are we? Yeah. Second key concept was about acts of worship. Remember, we said they have a design, right? Those of us who are a bit more spiritually inclined, when we think about acts of worship, illa mashallah, but again, we're just talking on a general communal level. Those of us who are more spiritually inclined, we kind of get caught up in the ajr game. We get caught up in the ajr game, right? It becomes a transaction. So one of the things the Imams say, and this is from people have heard of Sayyidina Imam Shah Waliullah Ad-Dahri radiyallahu anhu, the great Imam of the subcontinent, one of the great thinkers, people of immense depth. He's like the Ghazali of the subcontinent. Like, if you read his book Hujjatul al-Baligha, he has a great work which has been translated. It's the way that he approaches the philosophy of Islamic worship and rituals and just the idea of how we approach these things, very rooted, extremely deep way, right? One of the things he says in there, he says that every act of worship, your prayers, your fasting, your zakat, your dhikr, everything, it has 2 angles to it, right? And again, this is the thing about missing the point. There's the angle of ajr, and there's the angle of athar, right? One of my teachers calls it, one of Shaykh Bilal Hussain, our teacher, he calls it, there's athar and there's asrar. Acts of worship, they have rewards that are attached to them, and then they have a spiritual impact that's attached to them. The spiritual impact, right? So you have what's called, everyone sees the difference. Like, when you talk about rewards, like, like if you do this many prayers, you get this many rewards. If you pray in this masjid, you're going to get this many rewards for your prayer. If you, someone that prays Fajr inside the masjid, or Fajr in Jama'ah, for example, or any prayer in Jama'ah, you get 27 times the reward, for instance, right? That's the reward. And the reward is manifested where? In the Akhirah. If there's acceptance and the niyyah sound, Allah will manifest, Allah will show the reward. You'll receive that in the akhirah. That's the akhirah dimension of worship. It's about ajr, right? So what you get from worship in the akhirah is reward. That's not what we focus on in this world. This is a big problem, right? So those of us who are a bit more immaterial or spiritual, we start thinking about the rewards of things. So you do your 10,000 salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ, do this many salawat upon the Rasul, you're going to see him in a dream. Inshallah, Allah actualized, right? But the idea is that you get caught up in, and the issue with that is it's very transactional. It's what like Ibn al-Jawzi calls it, ibadat al-tujjar. Like the Imams speak about, like the scholars, they say there's 3 types of worshippers of Allah. There's those who worship him like business people, merchants, right? Worshipping Allah like merchants. And then there's those who worship him for value inside this world. And there's those who worship him for reward in the akhirah, and those who worship him for him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, if you want to be a true slave of Allah, you worship him for neither reward of this world or the reward of the akhirah, right? But the problem is that approach, reward-based approach, if I do this, I'll get this, right? If I do that, I'll get that. Problem with that is, like if you think about dua for many of us, the act of dua, it's been reduced to a transaction. Like if I start my dua like this, read this, make my dua, I'm going to get this in return. Dua was never meant to be for that. In fact, if you read the du'as of the Rasul, alayhi salawatullah, 80-90% of his du'as, he's not asking for anything. There's no asking there. Like if you think about any dua you know of the prophets in the Quran. Most of the du'as in the Quran of the prophets, they're not asking for anything. Like Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Allahumma inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir. Oh Allah, whatever good you sent to the earth, I'm needy. He's just making a statement of his own neediness. I need this. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Where's the ask? Like La ilaha illa anta, there's no deity except you, right? Subhanaka, glory be to you. I'm a sinful person. It doesn't say forgive me. It doesn't say grant me this, There's no ask. Right? The prophets, if you look at their du'as, one of the beauties of the du'as of the Rasul and the prophets, they're not transactional. They were about expressing your devotion to God. It's about loving him. And so now you want to be in a conversation with the one you love, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's about being in conversation. It was never about asking. But when you make dua a transaction, it's like I put these words in and I get this out. You just miss the meaning of it. You miss the point. Ramadan is a big danger. So Ramadan has an ajr, and everyone's thinking about the ajr. All the hadiths that we read about Ramadan and about the reward of it, and you get this in the end and you get that in the end. And the Rasul never made it about the ajr, alayhi salawatullah. The other aspect that we spoke about was athar. Like what's the spiritual impact of this, right? What is Ramadan designed to do? And that's really important. That's where we're going to end, inshallah. And I would like you to think about this a bit, right? So the idea is that Ramadan, it's a training ground. Like some of our teachers, they call it, it's a madrasa. Ramadan in its entirety, it's a school. Like you're entering a school of spirituality. When that night kicks in, Maghrib comes in at Ramadan, you just enrolled, you just registered yourself to a school of spirituality. And every school has a curriculum, and it has teachers, and it has students. You're the student, right? But it has teachers, and it has a curriculum. The Imams like Imam Sharani and others, they say that the curriculum, not in those words, but the basic idea, the curriculum of Ramadan is 2 things. And if you don't learn the curriculum, you can't pass the exam. Like how do I know I've passed Ramadan in the end? When I leave the Ramadan school 29, 30 days later, how do I know that I succeeded, that I've learned what needs to be learned, right? The curriculum is 2 things. This is really important. Hunger and dhikr. That's the entire curriculum. So the Ramadan teacher is teaching us hunger and dhikr. If you think about Ramadan, that's all it is. In the daytime, stay hungry. Every other moment, think about all that. What do we correlate as acts of worship with Ramadan? Like what are Ramadan specific or Ramadan special acts of worship? What is it that we do in Ramadan in a big way, acts of worship wise? Quran is the like center stage, right? Like if Ramadan was the stage, the center stage would be Quran. Quran is what? Supreme dhikr. Right? Allah calls it a dhikr. So Taraweeh, Quran and dhikr. It's all about everything that we do inside Ramadan. It's either about hunger or it's about, and hunger, not just hunger, of course, it's about self-discipline from all of our desires, right? It's about hunger and it's about dhikr, ultimately. That's the curriculum. So If somebody comes out of Ramadan and they want to see, has this worked for me? So has Ramadan worked for me? Has what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended? The rewards are there, by the way. You don't have to make a niyyah to get a reward to get the reward. You just make a niyyah that you're doing it for Allah and you get the reward. It's like the physical effects, like we mentioned. Rewards in the akhirah and physical outward material benefits in the dunya, these are all side effects. You get them anyway. There's no point intending these things or approaching them in that mindset, right? And this is the point. We end up, it either becomes one of those two and the point is missed. What it was ultimately about is missed, right? Remember what we said, acts of worship are designed to produce outcomes. The outcome is a particular type of transformation, right? So just take one, for example, right? So if you look at the definition of fasting, any basic fiqh book, fasting is defined as what? Abstaining from food, which is the desire of the stomach, and from intimacy, procreation, which is the desire of the privates, right? It's about staying away from that in the daylight hours. That's the definition of fasting they give you, right? In a book of fiqh. If you were to gather those two things together, abstaining from food and abstaining from procreation, fulfilling the physical desire, what in one word, how do you describe that? What is it about? What is it designed to do? What is it meant to be doing? What do you guys think? Just those two things, put them in one word. Right, in one word, what would that be? Abstention, but abstention accomplishes what? What's the outcome in one word? Excellent. It's about restraint. It's about control. It's self-discipline, right? And this is where for a lot of us, and I don't mean to be like negative about it, but for a lot of us, this is where Ramadan basically loses its meaning. For a lot of us, because the month was designed for learning restraint and discipline, right? It's designed to learn restraint. The entire curriculum, half of the curriculum, 50% of the curriculum, it's about restraint, which is what we said. What are the two subjects in the curriculum? Hunger and dhikr. 50% of it, hunger, was designed to train us to restrain ourselves, right? And what Shaykh al-Sharani, this is not in English right now. If you read about the way Imam al-Sharani speaks about this, Imam Sharani says, people have destroyed their Ramadan within Ramadan before it even ends. Because they've missed 50% of the message. 50% of the curriculum we ignore, which is about restraint. And so he's like, you don't have to even wait to the end of the month to see what the outcome is. We flopped in the midst of the month. Because we're not taking half of the curriculum. We've skipped 50% of the subjects. We're not in attendance. So for example, and this is what the sister goes on to speak about in the article, you can read it. If you think about our iftar setups, you think about the way we approach iftar, right? And again, guys, we're not talking about one-off indulgences. I'm talking about 29, 30 days, people are partying at iftar every night. Like, like you go and you're hosting an iftar and you do a one-off iftar, you have a weekend with the family, you go and do that. But if that's what, if all month looks like just the starters that we have are a king's meal, just the starters, right? Starters on their own are the food of kings, right? And so if we kind of flop every day in Ramadan at iftar, like Imam Sharani says that I heard one of my teachers, where he said Imam Sharani says one time I was traveling and I heard a majzoob speaking, one of these people that these spiritual people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has he's just sucked them into the divine wave, right? They outwardly, like we look at them and be like, this person's not violent, not sound, and not sane, right? You have this type of spiritual state that people are given. He said that I heard a majzoob speaking, and he was speaking about why people fast. And it's a very long conversation. Like it was like a few statements he makes. One of the things he says is that he's talking 10th century Egypt. We're not talking about 15th century UK, 10th century Egypt, the age of awliya, right? He says that the majzoob, the righteous man, the old man was sitting and he was saying, most of the people of our time don't fast. Then. And so he said, people are thinking like the majority of the Muslims do fast. People do fast, right? And of course, he wasn't talking about the outward fast. He said that someone that does not experience shiddatul ju', he says, someone that does not experience intense hunger as a state in that month has not fasted. And again, this is not medical advice, guys. Don't go and start like having 200 calories a day and then say, oh yeah, it was that event in Manchester or whatever, right? So like, the point is this needs to be measured. We think about this. The point is that he's making a point, which is that if you come out of the month and you're not more disciplined with food, you're not able to restrain yourself, right? You're not able to like just control your instinct. How many times do we have the experience, like you walk into a shopping center, or like you walk into a mall or something, and you're gone there, like you walk into the Lidl and you went there to buy milk, and then before you know it, you're buying donuts from the bakery section. Like, how did that happen, right? Or like you're gone into the Asda and you went for something in particular in mind, and people are like, it's instinct. We're driven by instinct, and Ramadan has come to suppress the instinct. Is designed for that. That's the point of it, right? And so often the reason why we're not having these transformations is because we're blocking the spiritual impact of the month. And this is what we're going to end with, inshallah, right? So if you have phones, guys, if you got like notebooks on phones, or did we get the pen and paper, by the way? Actually, leave it, Omar. It's going to take too long, I think. Yeah, let's leave it. If you want to take your phones out, if you want to note this down, you can note this down, right? This has something to lead you into the month, right? And if you want to do it mentally, you can do it mentally. But I would advise put this down, guys, right? Because remember what we said, what Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said at the beginning. These are doors that Allah opens, and we don't want to replicate. Ramadan before Ramadan. Like Ramadan is meant to be your annual check-in. Like, where am I spiritually with Allah subhanahu? Like we have weekly check-ins and monthly check-ins. Ramadan is the annual check-in with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's hard because like we live in a strange time, difficult time. Some of the stuff that the Imams have said is very heavy for us because we're not used to that language and that kind of conversation. But like, the Imams, our teachers, I heard this from my own teachers. They used to say this. They used to say that if 2 Ramadans come and you haven't changed or you're the same person, it's very dangerous. Like if this Ramadan comes and it's not different to your previous one, or you're not approaching it in a newly awakened way, right? It's going to be, it's a bad sign. And we ask Allah for protection and cover, inshallah. We ask Allah for His tawfiq because it's hard. Everything in society, everything in your environment right now, it's anti-Ramadan. Like the world is anti-Ramadan, hyper-consumist, and it's designed to negate the effects of Ramadan. The way we approach food, the way we approach social connections, the way we approach physicality, being physical creatures, the way we approach intimacy, for example. The society at large, it's an anti-Ramadan society. It's designed to negate the effects, right, of Ramadan. And so this is why it's important to get ahead of it and think about it, right? So if we make, this is just a term, it's not a real term, but if you think about like Ramadan is designed, like we said, for a particular spiritual impact, right? So there's particular impacts. Let's call them spiritual impacts for now, like the athar that we're talking about. There's particular spiritual impacts that Ramadan is meant to have through the curriculum, through the hunger, and through the dhikr, right? Particular spiritual impacts. And the Prophet spoke about these spiritual impacts. For example, the Prophet says things like, in fact, you guys know this. Let's do this together, right? So think about some of the things that the Prophet says, if you do them, they will negate the spiritual. They don't break your fast, but they negate the spiritual value of the fast. What can you think about in the hadith? There's many things that the Rasul spoke about. Many of you know them, right? Think about things that don't break the fast from a legal perspective. You fasted, no qada, nothing upon you, right? But they negate the spiritual fast, or they negate the spiritual impact of fast. Can you think of anything? For example, lying, for instance, right? The Rasul mentioned. What else? For example, using bad language, backbiting is a big one, right? There's a very visual instant where the Rasul, you know that hadith about the 2 women who claim to be fasting, and the Prophet says, how could they have been fasting? The meat, rotten meat of dead people is pouring out of their mouths. How have they been fasting? And it's because they sat together talking, for instance, right? And backbiting. What else? For example, fighting. Remember, think about all the hadiths where the Rasul says, someone who doesn't do X, Y, Z, Allah has no need for their hunger and their thirst. Remember all the hadiths, right? Man lam yada' qawla zur wal amala bihi wal jahla فليس لله حاجة في أن يدع طعامه وشرابه. Or كما قال, the Prophet says, someone that does not leave false testimony, spreading false news, And it's so easy in the time we live in. Someone shares something, you forward it. Someone posts something, you like it, right? Now all your followers are seeing it. Sharing false news, lying, ghiba is a big one, right? These things, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, they're spiritual impact blockers, right? They're like SIBs, spiritual impact blockers. You have all of these relate to what? The lying, ghiba, fighting, arguing. What do they relate to, all of these things? Which part, where do they emanate from? They all relate to the tongue. So let's take the tongue as one thing, right? Tongue. What else? What other spiritual impact blockers do we have that we know of? We just spoke about one, the 50% of the curriculum. Indulge food. Food, like those of you who were there in the meetup, right, in Preston. Food, the reason why Ramadan wants us to empty out is because it's not just, Allah's not, like, this is a sad thing. People have, like, Allah doesn't, there's nothing that He gets from you being hungry and thirsty or you being full. Neither state impacts Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't do anything, right? And it's not just like as a test of your sacrifice. No, like there's a hikmah in this, right? So having your digestive tract empty has a spiritual impact, right? So if you think about it, what's the correlation? Remember the two parts of the curriculum. You can't have one curriculum and the two parts are disconnected. They're all connected, right? Otherwise, it's not a good curriculum. What's the connection between hunger and dhikr? How do you describe that? They're part of one curriculum. Why are they both part of the Ramadan madrasa? What's the connection between hunger and dhikr? Why isn't it just hunger or just dhikr or something else? There has to be a connection. What do you think? Remember, this is a divine curriculum. Allah's designed the curriculum, Jalla Thana'ullah. What's the wisdom in combining emptiness through hunger with dhikr? How do they relate? Think about your experience. Think about your experience with the Quran. Go ahead, Baji. Okay, excellent. So one thing, that's good. Excellent, right? So dhikr itself is a type of nourishment. It's a type of sustenance, right? For the spirit. That's good. But how would you connect being physically empty, hungry, and dhikr? One's material and one's spiritual. How are they connected?
Lack of food enhances spirituality.
Okay, excellent, right? The idea is that one serves the other. Hunger creates the environment for dhikr to take impact. This is something that, it's not even just a Muslim thing, by the way. The Buddhists do this thing. Every human civilization, from what we know in traceable history, they all have some kind of fasting. The Greeks, the Stoics, the Buddhists, every civilization that has a spiritual dimension, why do they all have fasting as an element? Right, as part of and we know this now scientifically. Empty stomach helps with meditation and focus, things like that. So we've got some backing for this, right? But the idea is that dhikr will stay with you if you're empty physically, right? And you've experienced this. Why does everybody have why do you all, inshallah, everyone here has a deeper experience with the Quran and with their salah in Ramadan than outside Ramadan? You're the same person. Nothing's changed. Same voice box, same stamina, same amount of reading. Everything's the same. What's different? You're hungry. There's an emptying out that's happening, right? And that emptying out allows for the dhikr now to have the impact. So food and indulgence, Abu Bakr was saying, indulgence is a big spiritual impact blocker. It's a major blocker. So let's take I'm going to just focus on these two things, guys, right? So we've got, if you look at the hadith, all of them, collect them all together, two things. One is the tongue and one is the stomach. So the big spiritual transformative impact blockers that we suffer from in Ramadan are either related to the tongue or they're related to the stomach. And this is what we were saying Imam Sharani says, right? Imam Sharani, frighteningly, and that's his general style, but when he says that we've already destroyed the impact of Ramadan before the month even ends. Within every day at iftar, most of us are negating that day. Those 12 hours that you were hungry for Allah, at iftar we negate the impact. The spiritual, you get the reward, your fast is done, all of that's there. But the impact, the transformative impact of Ramadan, we've just negated it, just by iftar. And we ask Allah for protection. Does everyone see the point here, right? So two things, the tongue and the stomach. The tongue and the stomach, right? So what I want you to do is this, guys, inshallah. You can start this here and you can work on this in a deeper way as we move forward, inshallah. And then we can open this up for discussion. This can be part of the discussion. So at this point, I'm going to open up and we can here's what I want you guys to do, inshallah. I want you all to think about, and inshallah, like begin with myself. I've already started. It's right here, right? I want you all to think about a to not do list for Ramadan, not a to-do list. Because a to-do list is all ajr orientated. Right? I'm gonna do this extra worship because I'm gonna get more rewards. Right? I'm gonna do this because I'm gonna do it at Fajr time because we get more. It becomes a very transactional kind of thing. And end of Ramadan, same guys popping out, maybe with 3 inches on the belly, and that's it. Nothing else has changed. And then next Ramadan, it's the same cycle, right? And it's unfortunate, no kidding, wallahi. Last year, one of the things that really, it was just shocking, right? Was like I was speaking to a group of brothers about their Ramadan experience. You know, one of the items that people share now about their Ramadan experience is the new places they went to for iftar. And he kind of missed the point. And it started to happen now, even in Medina Sharif, for example. No kidding, like you talk to people about how's Medina Sharif. Oh yeah, we found this new joint. Like we went to this new place. And again, we're not saying don't go, and we're not saying don't go to do the iftar. The point is that it should never feature. It's not a feature. That shouldn't be a reflection point from your Ramadan, a reflection point from your visit to the city of the Rasul. That's not what it's meant to be, right? And so what I want to do is don't focus on your to-do list. All of you know exactly what to do. Fast, read Quran, chill out, go to Taraweeh, and just get through the month. Everyone knows what to do, right? There's nothing special about it, right? What we need to start thinking about, if we're going to be like a bit more mature spiritually, and we're talking about, this is like a conversation for a degree of spiritual maturity, right? If we want to really, really take from the month, as we said, and take from the act of Ramadan in accordance with its design. Remember what we said? This is about, because we don't want to negate the divine design. Allah's designed this worship to do something, right? This is the conversation. The conversation we're having right now is for those who want that. Like who wants an outcome to the month that matches the design of the month? That's what we're talking about here. This is the conversation, inshallah, right? So start thinking about a to not do list. A to not do list, right? And again, like I said, don't be abstract, be particular, very particular. For example, last Ramadan, if there was too many iftar parties, right? Because where does indulgence happen usually? Indulgence happens usually when you're with the boys, when you're with the mates, you're going out, you're with the family, right? Maybe this year, don't accept too many invitations. Accept a bunch of invitations, right? And the rest of them, just be like, sorry, I can't make it. Inshallah, even at home. Like if at home the environment's toxic, like I'm sorry, this is not like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but have a cover-up iftar, like I've eaten, right? I was praying Maghrib and I ate, and I'll get to it later, early after Taraweeh, and come back and just go to bed, and you just had like a bunch of dates and milk or whatever, right? So, what we're saying is that whatever your catalyst, whatever your trigger is for the stomach blocker that we spoke about, the SIB, spiritual impact blocker, stomach, number one, whatever was leading you to negate that, think about those things, like right now, think about those things and make a to not do list about that.